my hope this morning is that we've provided these young adults in confirmation with more questions than we have answers. That they're coming here today publicly professing their faith with the understanding that today doesn't mark an end of a journey for them, but rather it's a stepping off point, a place to begin, a starting point for the rest of their lives. I hope what we've done, in fact, is not given them any answers, but what we've helped do is help them to develop tools to think deeply, critically, and honestly about their faith. I hope what we've done is given them permission to question everything about it. I hope we've opened up their hearts and their minds, not to certainty, but to doubt. Because this morning isn't about recognizing an end, but it's about acknowledging that this is just a beginning, and that this process that they've been through isn't been about giving them the correct answers, but this process has been about teaching them to ask the right questions. After spending months of their Sunday afternoons with Jim Dixon, their mentors, and myself, my prayer is that they realize something vitally important about the nature of faith. And that's something that, like I was telling the kids up here, the theologian Paul Tillich once said, faith isn't an answer. Faith is a question. And every question has a hint of doubt in it. But that hint of doubt, that question of who or what God is, that longing to know and connect to this God better, that's what keeps us searching, keeps us looking and asking to know God better and in deeper ways. Questions and doubts aren't the enemies of faith. But if they're used correctly, they can become integral tools in the development and in the strengthening of our faith. It's not that answers aren't important, and it isn't that we shouldn't expect answers from our questions, and it certainly isn't the case that faith doesn't provide us answers or contain answers. There are certainties that come with faith. God's grace and God's love are two of those certainties. The theologian Karl Barth was notorious for saying Jesus is the answer, so now what's the question? But I believe that the way we get to those answers and the way we get to those certainties come through our ability and our courage to ask questions, to struggle and acknowledge our own doubts. The problem is that too often, for some reason, people get the idea that church isn't a place to ask these questions, to step out and examine who we are or what we believe or what it can really mean to be a Christian. The church has developed a reputation for being a place where you have to suspend your disbelief, blindly accept things despite evidence to the contrary, and to give in to absolutes. People somehow are of the opinion that the church and thereby Christianity only deals in certainty, and so that doubt doesn't have a place here. But that simply isn't or shouldn't be the case. The church should be a community where we get to struggle with these questions and these doubts together, where we look for these answers together, where we find that maybe the only absolute in this life is God. A church is a community where each of us seem to have different pieces to the puzzle. And when we bring those pieces here, we begin to see a little bit better how these pieces begin to fit together. Church, like confirmation class, hopefully, isn't a place where you get handed the answers, but it's a community where you get to struggle with the questions together in order to find those answers together. Paul, in this letter to the Galatians, gives us vague insight into his own conversion. It's not as vivid or profound, as miraculous as the Acts account by his telling, but it's just as beautiful because of what he hints at here. Paul moved from someone who was so certain in his thinking and beliefs that he was blind to the questions, blind to the possibility that God could be anything more than what he was raised and taught to believe, blind to what may lie outside of the box. He was so convicted in the certainty of his faith and tradition that he was violently trying to destroy any challenge to that tradition, anything that was slightly out of the box, anything that dared to question if there was a deeper or different understanding to God than the one he had. But somehow, a question snuck in. And here in Galatians, he doesn't tell us how or why. He doesn't make reference to anything miraculous like the road to Damascus. But what he says is that no one just handed him the answers. No one taught him about the good news or the gospel, but that God then somehow, through grace, revealed Jesus Christ to him. And everything about Paul, everything that Paul was so certain about, so convicted in, took for such an absolute, was just changed in an instant. And then Paul goes on, he spends the rest of his life struggling and searching to understand his faith in the light of these new questions. It was only just the beginning. I hope what we've given these confirmands is more questions than we have answers. Because the really important questions of life, with the questions of faith, like Paul says, the answers don't come through human origins. They come through the grace of God. These young adults we've had the privilege to work with these past few months are some of the most brilliant, creative, and curious people I've met in my entire life. It's tempting to stand up here and embarrass them by telling you all everything that I find so wonderful about them, but I'm going to cut them some slack here today. But Westminster, you should really be proud of each one of them. They're truly in the legacy and in the tradition of the best parts of this church. And we should be honored and deeply grateful for the privilege that they've chosen to make their faith home here with us. Throughout my career as a minister so far, I've been asked to serve on the Committee on Preparation for Ministry, which helps people discern their calling to become ordained ministers. I've been a grader of ordination exams on theology, and I've had to read more statements of faith than I would care to count written by people who are seeking ordination into ministry in the Presbyterian Church. That's all to say that I have dealt with my fair share of seminary graduates, people with master's degrees and beyond in this kind of stuff. Many of them think they've found the answers to life's toughest questions. I'd hold up any of these confirmands against any one of them when it comes to thinking deeply about faith and being able to communicate clearly what it is they hold in their hearts. I guess what I'm trying to say is that they already know the answers. It isn't really our job to give them the answers. That's God's job through the grace of Jesus Christ. We're just lucky enough to help them find those answers, to encourage them to keep seeking, to provide them with a safe place to come with all their questions and doubts, and to learn and listen to them as they bring their pieces here and see how that fits into the greater puzzle of this great mystery. We're lucky enough to be here to mark the beginning of this great journey that they begin here today. The journey of faith into adulthood. To our confirmands this morning, as you begin this new journey, please, please, don't lose your courage to question. Don't lose your curiosity. Or let anyone convince you that you'd have to fit neatly inside of some box. Don't lose your courage to question or accept easy answers. Don't ever stop listening to the voice of God speaking to your hearts or let anyone squelch that voice. But love openly. Feel deeply. Accept freely. Forgive often. Remember that God's grace is forever on your life. And keep the courage of being what uniquely makes you you. Knowing that not only do God and Jesus love you, but this church loves you as well. And so welcome to the church. Your journey is just beginning. Welcome to adulthood. And you're still going to have to keep your rooms clean. So let us pray.